Yeah. Hello, Premaji, Anandji. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, great.
I've given you the rights, co-hosting rights.
Okay, done, done.
Yeah.
So with me, Sanjana is also going to present a few slides. We'll be presenting on the same computer.
Okay.
Okay.
So just before I start admitting all the participants, just wanted to give you a heads up on the program.
Right.
So I'll give a, I'll start the call at 4 o'clock, and I'll read out a brief profile of yours. And
Okay.
then the president, vice president is going to give a short welcome remarks.
Okay.
And after that, the floor would be, for you. So you can
Sure,
take
sure.
the session. Uh,
Okay.
there will be Q&A. People will be muted,
Right.
and they will not be given the unmute rights except you.
Right. Okay.
So they will be muted throughout the session. Towards
Right.
the end of the session, I can unmute them. I can allow them to unmute.
Right.
So if they have any questions, they can voice out, or I will, at the beginning of the session, I'll tell them to write their queries in the chat box during the session. So in
Sure,
the
sure.
session, if they
Anything,
have
anything.
any questions,
Yeah,
they'll put it in the chat box.
correct, correct.
But
Sure.
during the session, while you are speaking, your presentation is going on. Nobody will have the access to speak.
Okay, but they can still send out the query. So in case we want to read
Yes,
it
so
out.
the chat box will be open, and they can
Perfect.
keep typing in the any questions.
Okay, I think that's great.
Okay.
And the vice president will be, so Paresh Bhai will be joining?
No, Abhishek Gangwal.
Abhishek Nagwal. Okay, okay.
Paresh
Sure.
Bhai is senior vice president.
Okay, okay. I see, I see.
Yeah.
Done.
So I'm
Okay.
starting to allow people in.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. See you in a bit.
Okay, thank you.
Pitfalls and strategy for transferring assets to a new company with expert on the subject. We are fortunate to have with us as a guest speaker CS Sureel Mehta, who has kindly agreed to share his enriched and provide valuable guidance on the subject. About the Federation of Gujarat Industries, FGI, founded in the year 1918, is an apex industries association and a recognized chamber of commerce in Gujarat, having an illustrious track record of more than 100 years in the service of trade and industry. It has grown from strength to strength and has blossomed into a mature industries association. FGI has been providing guidance and hand-holding the industries of our state and representing the pain area industries to all relevant authorities in the central government. FGI has also actively and timely provided representations, suggestions, and policies and foreign trade. I would like to reaffirm FGI's commitment to steer the growth of its and we shall continue working closely with the government for due implementation of policies and initiatives and also continue to deliver such webinars that aid in industries. With these few words, I thank you for your attention and over to Mr. Sureel Mehta.
Yeah, hello. So thanks Abhishek ji for the warm introduction. Thanks Premal ji for making this happen. I would also like to thank Manoran ji to just a minute. Yeah, I would also like to thank Manoran ji to give me this opportunity. I also want to just introduce my colleague CA Sanjra, who's also going to be co-presenting the webinar with me. Frankly, so I have given webinars at few places, but by far webinar lectures, etc. By far, FGI has been my best experience so far. So earlier, I was privileged to give a session on a similar topic. It was a live session, and the response was I got a very warm response. A lot of audience interaction happened, and I think that is what makes a session interesting, where it's not, otherwise you would just feel that you are going on and on without any feedback. But this was a case earlier, live session, where a lot of questions were being raised. There was a lot of discussion, so that was really interesting, and I really enjoyed that session. So I'm hoping that this time it's no different. It's a webinar, and webinars are by that nature a bit less interactive. But let's. I really hope that I would get a good amount of participation questions, and I would request that. So there's an online chat option. So I would request everyone to just keep posing your questions. I like to answer as many questions as possible. Yeah, so without further ado, I'll just start with the session. This session is focused on the new tax regime benefits for new manufacturing companies, the 15% tax slab which has been introduced. Earlier, we took a session on that with respect to the applicability, the conditions, etc. But now we are focusing on how the existing companies or how the existing concerns, any type of concerns, existing concerns, how can they take benefit of this? And we are going more deeper into that and focusing on the practicalities of the same. So we'll start with a quick recap of the conditions. The features. The overall tax, the effective tax rate is 17%, 17.16%. The way it has been framed right now is that the benefit is available for the life. It's a lifetime benefit right now without any sunset clause. Minimum alternate tax is not applicable. Minimum alternate tax, anyways, the tax rate is the same. It's around 17%. So it anyways generally would not make sense, although the base is different. But MAT is not applicable. At the same time, generally MAT credit also will not be available. In case of violation, so as we discussed, this is a benefit which is available for the lifetime of the company. So by the same corollary, there are certain conditions which are supposed to be fulfilled by a company for its entire life. And in case of non-compliance of the condition, in certain cases, it will go back to the other provisions where the normal existing companies which are taxed at a rate of 25%. So they will go back to the 25% tax slab. In case of some other conditions like splitting up, reconstruction, etc., if that is not complied with, in that case, you don't get the benefit of 25%, you get the benefit of 25% plus 30% plus plus. So this is 25% plus surcharge cess, 30% plus surcharge cess. So this is something that you can keep in mind. We'll refer to this in the later part of the presentation. Yeah. The conditions are that for the applicability is that it has to be a new company registered after. So I'll just jump. I'll just very quickly take through all these conditions and the provisions because we want to move on to the practical cases. So the conditions are that it has to be a newly incorporated company, incorporated after October 2019. It has to be engaged in manufacturing activities and the operations should be commenced before March 2023. The business should not be formed by splitting up or reconstruction of an existing business. This is probably the most subjective and the ambiguous clause out of all the conditions. So this is where we'll probably focus a bit more. This again is an objective condition. So 1, 2, 4, all are objective criteria where the purpose of this provision, of course, is to to ensure that there's more and more capital expenditure, more and more capacity expansion, etc., that happens in India. So therefore, the new concern should not be using old plant and machinery. Up to 20% is allowed to use old plant and machinery. Also, one other exception is that imported plant and machinery would not actually be considered as imported plant and machinery fulfilling certain conditions will not be considered as a old plant and a used plant and machinery. The other point is that the idea is to simplify the tax code. So you cannot actually avail certain tax benefits which was earlier advantageous. It's so one, they have reduced the rate, but at the same time, in certain tax benefits have been taken off. The two main benefits are additional depreciation. Additional depreciation, incidentally, is it looks great on paper, but it is just a timing difference. It's not an extra depreciation that you get. It's just depreciation is something which you get in advance. So 20% additional depreciation is not something that you will get in the 17% tax regime. But anyways, I don't think that this is a major disadvantage. So the other benefit is R&D benefit, which was earlier allowed, won't be allowed in this scheme. Incidentally, R&D benefits have anyways gone, so they are anyways not allowed now. So this was the in-house depreciation, which is not allowed. Right. As we discussed, the focus will be more on the existing concerns. So I've just tried to divide as to what can be the possible stages for an existing concern. So stage one is where a new project is conceptualized, but no capex has yet started to being incurred. So it's just a new project. It's a very starting phase. So at this time, to implement a strategy where you take benefit of the new tax regime is going to be the easiest. The focus here will be on the legal aspects, especially things like reconstruction and split off of existing business. So that is where we'll go into a few cases. Stage two is stage one, where you actually conceptualize a new project. At the same time, some amount of capex has already started getting incurred. You incur capex, but at the same time, the business has still not commenced operation. So the actual manufacturing activity has not happened. It's the plant is getting set up, or it has already been set up, but still manufacturing hasn't started. So that is we have put all these things in stage two. So that is everything in stage one. That is right now we'll focus on the legal aspects, and apart from that, we'll focus on the transfer mechanics, because in that case, you would actually have to transfer the CWIP, the capital work in progress, which is there in the existing company to the new company. So that is an additional thing which will be important in stage two, and that is going to be the focus of this presentation. Stage three is still more evolved stage, where stage two, where capex has already been getting incurred, but some portion of the business have also started. It has started commencing. So the operations have already commenced. So let's say there may be 2-3 units. One unit have commenced operation. 2 units are still not commenced operation. So you already start claiming depreciation. It is possible to implement a 115 BAB scheme in that case, but it's much more complex. So we have not covered that presently in this seminar. And as you would note that it's an analogy to a cancer patient, that more the stages, the riskier it is. So the same will apply here as well. It's better to start early. It's better to start at stage one itself, where the capex has not been incurred. However, even if the capex has been incurred, it is still certainly possible that these provisions can be implemented. Risk is something that we looked at earlier. We'll look at it again in case you still don't fulfill the provisions. Right, so we'll just jump on to stage one, where we focus on the legal aspects. Again, to reiterate, stage one is where capex still has not been incurred for the new project. Yeah, so I'll just hand it over to Sanjana to take a few slides on this.
So like Suril mentioned, this entire section is extremely subjective, the way it is worded. So it will be extremely interesting to see how to understand the language of the section. At many of the places, it has been left ambiguous and open to interpretation. However, we should appreciate that this ambiguity, in most of the cases, it has been used in favor of the taxpayer. Like Suril mentioned, it draws analogy to various previous provisions. So looking at the precedents, we can say that in most cases, it has been interpreted positively with a view to ensure that the scope of the section and the benefit is not limited. So we've identified a few areas which have been subject to litigation in the past and are extremely interesting, and we need to ensure that we interpret them properly to ensure we can get the maximum benefit of the section. One such issue is the scope of manufacturing. How they have interpreted manufacturing. Like we know, it is applicable purely to manufacturing concerns. The other and the most crucial issue is regarding splitting up, the meaning of splitting up and reconstruction of a business in existence. These are terms that have nowhere been defined in the Act or in clarified in the section. And the third point is regarding the threshold, the 20% threshold for used plant and machinery that we need to be careful about. So coming to manufacturing, this is something I'll just reiterate. It is very, very clearly written in the section itself that the section applies to pure manufacturing concerns, and any amount of unrelated trading or service activities, even if it is as small as a 5% of the total revenue, would not uh, entail us to the benefit of the section. So, like I mentioned, normally these provisions are interpreted in a, like the scope is ensured to be kept wide. So there are a few interesting cases regarding manufacture, which I'd like to discuss further. One is regarding outsourcing, where even if part of the production is outsourced, even that has been considered as manufacturing, subject to certain conditions. And the key here is to ensure that the control and supervision is with the entity that is claiming the benefit. If that is fulfilled, even an outsourced activity can be considered as manufacturing. So when you're talking of a job work situation, if the supervision and regular inspection is carried out, the raw material is provided by the company, and only a part of the process is outsourced, we can still claim the benefit as a manufacturing entity.
So just to reiterate one point that Chandra mentioned, that this is a provision which is actually ambiguous, but ambiguous doesn't have to be considered negatively. Ambiguous provision may lead to litigation, but at the same time, we have seen this is a 100-year-old provision. So this kind of word, this phrase has been used since more than 100 years. It was there since the 1922 Act, and again quotes, the most of the cases have been interpreted in favor of the assessee, in favor of the taxpayer. So just to reiterate that point, that we have seen a lot of favorable decisions, and we wanted to give a few examples. So this is an interesting, it's a funny example where what happened is that it's a pretty old case, a 1960 case, where there was a company which was involved in printing balance sheets, profit and loss statements, so pamphlets. So it was involved in the process of printing. What they claimed is that the paper and the ink was the raw material, and the printed material that emerges is the finished product. So this also amounts to manufacturing. So the reason we are taking manufacturing is that in normal parlance, we would not say that these things are manufacturing, but even these things have been considered as manufacturing, and it was held in favor of the taxpayer. So yes, Sandra, you can.
Another such example has been of an assembly activity where parts are combined and transformed into a finished product with a different utility, distinct utility. Even that is a case of manufacture. So these may seem like it does not, there is no direct involvement of plant, machinery, and a process being carried out, but still it can be manufactured. The key is to keep in mind that there has to be a commercially different product that is coming out of the process. So the next and the most crucial clause here is the that of splitting up or reconstruction of a business in existence. So I'll just read out the condition they've laid down. The exact words say that the business is not formed by splitting up or reconstruction of a business already in existence. So of course, splitting up and reconstruction are terms we will go in detail. But the other part is also extremely crucial to understand, because what we're saying here is that splitting up or reconstruction, we are talking of a business that is already in existence. So the first thing we need to determine here is whether if we are at stage 1 or stage 2, can we say that we have a business that is in existence? And the second thing we need to keep in mind is that if there is a splitting up or reconstruction, is the business formed by such splitting up or reconstruction? So coming to the understanding of a business in existence, normally by a business in existence, we would understand a business that is operational. And there are precedents for this, where it has been held that even if there is an entity, a company in existence, but for the past 5 to 10 years, there is no activity for whatever reason, then in that case also, it will not be a business in existence because there is no operating activity being carried out. So that said, to understand this term better, normally the decisions, the judgments have relied on the understanding of terms like setting up and commencement of business. So by setup is has a wider connotation. it is to do with installation of plant and machinery and the basic infrastructure, which makes a business ready to commence operations. Commencement talks about the vital and important activities being incurred. So in the practical scenario, like in our case, we could be in stage 1 or stage 2, but we can be faced with situations like we have done a trial run of production, but we have not started commercial operations. So that would not amount to a business in existence. So this has also been interpreted liberally, because what we're saying is that there is a prototype, for example, which we are making ready, but that will be subject to changes, and it is not a commercially marketable product that we are producing. Similarly, there can be a situation of straight or one-off cases of trading operations, where, for example, there has been some material which we had purchased for the trial purpose, and we are selling it. So that would not be that would not lead to a business coming into existence, as it is not the main objective of the business we are setting.
Yeah, and just to reiterate the principles laid down, the condition is that it has to be a split up or reconstruction of a business which is in existence. So business in existence is incidentally not defined, but we are trying to infer the definition through what has been earlier litigated is business which is set up or business which has commenced operations. And these have been very liberally interpreted. The sum and substance of this is a business which has already started a crucial activity, like let's say manufacturing process, or probably one process which is very crucial to manufacturing, like purchase of raw material, etc. So before this stage, it can actually be interpreted that even if you have incurred a substantial amount of substantial amount of capex, even in that case, it is not a business in existence. So therefore, you can very well transfer this to a new concern and take benefit of 115 BAB. Of course, subject to litigation, but this is the principle that we would want to lay out. We are taking a few cases which were harping on the definition of business split up or reconstructed, a business in existence which has been split up or reconstructed. This is a case of textile machinery, a Supreme Court decision very well quoted. So there is a company which had an existing engineering unit. It set up 2 new units into steel foundry and jute mills. The new unit was set up to supply raw material to the existing concern, the heavy metal unit. So this was a case of a backward integration. It looks like it's just expand. So it was a case of expansion of activity. It was not a completely radically new market, etc. It was just backward integration which was carried out. What was held is that a new investment was involved. It was a new and independent business. Even though backward integration, it was still an independent business. And expansion per se, just by saying that it is expansion, that doesn't mean it is reconstruction. So in this case, actually the benefit was given. So this is a case which has been very well quoted very well quoted by most of the courts. So this is a case where it was so again, this is a Supreme Court decision. It's a very recent Supreme Court decision where there was a sole proprietorship by the name of Greenfire. It was so Mr. A was holding this sole proprietorship. There was another firm which was started, again, where you can see that Mr. A has 80% stake in this new partnership firm. And from the existing sole proprietorship, the employees and the capital was transferred to the new entity. Both these entities were involved in similar business, not the same, but similar business. So what was held is both the entities were involved in manufacturing and export of jewelry. Right? So also, additionally, one thing that I've highlighted is that the existing concern was actually shut off. It ceased to exist. What was held is that the new entity was engaged in a better product or better process. So it was not a completely case of a completely similar business being established in a new entity. And there was no transfer of assets. So no plant and machinery was actually transferred from the existing to the new concern. Substantial fresh capital was involved. So because of all these conditions, incidentally, even this case where probably normally it looks like it's a case of splitting up or reconstruction, but due to involvement of fresh capital, due to involvement of a better process, this was held to be not violating the conditions of reconstruction. So it was ruled in favor of the taxpayer.
So this is another interesting case of splitting up, where there is a partnership firm in existence which is involved in the book binding business. One of the partners, Mr. A, who is a partner in the existing firm, retires from the partnership and he sets up his independent unit, again involved in book binding business. And the existing firm is giving some business to the new entity. Now, this forms a very small part of the total business of the new entity. So it could, from the look of it, it appears like a splitting up, a case of splitting up, because the same business is now being carried out by two separate, in two different entities. However, the key here is, the key to splitting up, understanding splitting up, is that there has to be unity of control if it is a splitting up. Here, the control and ownership is completely different, and the new entity can exist as a separate entity with a separate market, and hence it is not treated as a splitting up. And to add to it, new and separate labor and employees were employed in this entity, and there was no transfer of capital. So that is the reason why it is concluded it is not a case of splitting up.
So this is a strange case. No way it should be considered the current case. No way it should be considered as a precedent. It's a Bombay High Court case. The reason for putting this case is not to confuse you guys, but for you to understand that the courts have in fact interpreted these provisions very liberally. So I think this is a testament to that point that I have been repeating it. So here there was an existing partnership firm which was involved, which had a shoe manufacturing factory. What it did was, this partnership firm sold the business to another company, which was a completely unrelated company, Gaikwad Phone. This company was engaged in a separate business. So the existing one had a shoe factory. The new one is involved in the manufacturing of foam and rubber. So this was a case of sale of business. Incidentally, sale of business was against issuing shares to the partnership, to the partners of the partnership firm. So this, it was a case of existing assets being transferred to the new company. However, what was held is that this is a case of purchase of business by the new concern. The original entity ceases. So the facts are that the original entity ceases to function, and its identity is lost or abandoned. Incidentally, it is not the same persons who are actually carrying out both the businesses. So Coral is held by X, Gaikwad is held by Y. Even though there is some amount of same shareholding between them because shares were issued, however, the substantial shareholding was different in case of Gaikwad Phones. So same people were not carrying out. So it was held that this is a genuine case of transfer of ownership. It's a genuine case of sale. It was not done in an artificial way just to claim this benefit. So because of that, it was held that this was not a reconstruction, but because it's an out and out sale in substance, so therefore this was the benefit was given to the taxpayer, ruled in favor of the taxpayer. Right. So just very quickly pointing out to the case of transfer of used machinery. You want to take? Yeah. So the definition of plant and machinery. So what does plant include? Would a building be a part of plant? So that is one of the question. Incidentally, in section 32, building plant specifically excludes building. That definition is relevant only for section 32, which is depreciation, not for the existing section. So it may be interpreted that a building is a part of the plant. So the implication is that a factory building also should be considered as plant because of any other lack of any other clarity. A factory building which is used for the manufacturing process should be considered as a plant. So this becomes important to actually value the threshold of old plant and machinery being used in the new unit, the 20% threshold. So we have a 20% threshold that you can use old plant and machinery up to 20% of the value of the entire plant and machinery. The other point is that what is the meaning of the word value? Is it book value? Is it net block? Is it gross block? That is a question that very frequently is asked. I am asked that question very frequently. So I would say that because the term value is not defined, it should be considered as fair market value. So either get a chartered engineer certificate, or at best you can consider the net block rather than consider the tax WDV or considering the gross block. So now we move on to the crux of the presentation, where we actually go in for the structuring alternatives. So this is one of the reason is also it's not a very simple process. So I just wanted to highlight a few of the ways in which this can happen and what all challenges can happen and how best can we address these challenges. Right. So few of the structures which are possible. The most intuitive structure, the obvious structure is a structure of wholly owned subsidiary, where there's an existing company that forms a wholly owned subsidiary. I'll term it as WOS. So that's obviously advantageous because it's very simple. It's simple to form. It gives the benefit of consolidation because in the books of accounts of the existing company, the financials of WOS also will be consolidated. So therefore, that is also advantageous. The other advantage is credit worthiness. So because it's a wholly owned subsidiary, it may be considered for the credit worthiness of the existing company as well. The other advantage is that any transfer that happens from an existing company to a wholly owned subsidiary, any transfer of assets is exempt from tax. There is no capital gains on that transfer. The only condition is that this WOS has to remain a WOS for 8 years. So you cannot transfer even one share of this WOS for 8 years. Otherwise, this exemption goes away. But if it's held as a WOS for 8 years, this exemption is certainly available. Another structure is a parallel structure where the new company will have the same shareholding pattern as the existing company. So again, in both the cases, we are talking about a case where relevant for stage 1 also, but more relevant for stage 2, where the existing company actually transfers CWIP to the new company. So new company can be a WOS, where the transfer is exempted. New company can be a parallel company. The advantage of parallel company is the maximum advantage is in case of an exit. So let's say if there's a parallel company. So by parallel company, what I say is that the new company, the company claiming 115 BAB benefit, is having the same shareholding pattern as the existing company. In that case, in case of an exit, all you have to do is that the promoter, the main shareholders, can sell the shares of the parallel company, or either a complete share or part of the share, and the money directly reaches the shareholders. Whereas in the first case, in the case of WOS, when the shares of the WOS are sold, the money goes to the existing company. It doesn't go directly to the shareholders. And from existing company to the shareholders, there is an additional tax of 36%, the dividend tax, which is around more than 30%. But generally, if the income is more than 1 crore, it reaches to 35.88%. So that's an additional tax which has to be incurred, which is not incurred in the second structure. So that's one of the primary advantage. The other advantage is that it is possible the fund repatriation can be very easy. One of the key aspects of structuring to be considered in this case is dividend repatriation. How do you actually repatriate the profits that are generated by the WOS or the parallel company? So one of the way to repatriate profits is dividend. That's the most obvious way. When the WOS repatriates dividend to the existing company, it's exempt from tax. The condition is that the existing company has to repatriate the same dividend in the same year or the next year before filing the return. Only in that case that dividend is exempt. Otherwise, the dividend will be taxed in the hands of the existing company. The rate can be as high as 25%. So whatever is the rate for the existing company will be the rate for dividend. So that's a tax leakage. In the second structure, what can be done is that instead of declaring dividend, the parallel company can either invest in equity instruments or preference shares of the existing company, and the fund transfer can happen. There are other ways also. We'll look at that. So this is a kind of a mashup of the things that can be considered for structuring. Again, the simplest structure is having a WOS. Simplest structure is having a WOS with equity, the most obvious structure. One tendency is that instead of equity, why not go for debt? So why not go for debentures? Debentures, the benefit of debentures is that repayment is easy. All you have to do is redeem the debentures. The other advantage is that interest, there's an interest expense. So interest expense is deductible at one place, taxable at one place. So generally it is tax neutral deductible at one place and taxable at one place. But here, as I mentioned, 17% is the tax rate for the WOS or the parallel company. And the tax rate for the existing company generally will be higher, so 25%. So there's a tax leakage of 8%. You save 17% tax because interest expense is deductible. You pay 25% tax because interest income is taxable. So there's a tax leakage of 8%. So because of that, in fact, in most of the cases, equity will be much better than debt. So instead of going to debt, the equity will be better. However, in debt, there are certain instruments which are possible, like a zero coupon bond. It's something that can be experimented with. Zero coupon bond is a case of a debenture where no interest is to be paid. The redemption happens at a premium. At the time of redemption, you can also convert it to equity. So you can get the benefit of both the interest expense because that discount is allowed as an interest expense. And at the same time, there is no interest income which is taxable. So something that can be considered. The other options are preference shares. So preference shares is one interesting option because it is actually like a equity. It's a share. So in preference shares, there is no need for compulsory payment of interest. So that is one interesting advantage. The other advantage is that you can repay the prepayment, the repayment, etc. can happen much easier than an equity share. The only disadvantage of preference shares is it's not a disadvantage, but it's not that easy to structure it because of the numerous deeming fiction which are there in the Income Tax Act. So the deeming fictions with respect to dividend payment. Yeah. So because of that provisions, in case of preference shares, what is the rate of dividend that should be provided? What is the redemption premium that should be considered? So those are the things which are important to analyze for preference shares. But otherwise, preference shares is a very strong instrument. Apart from preference shares, there are other instruments which are possible, like optionally convertible instruments, debentures, preference shares, equity, etc. So these are the things because of commercial reasons also that can be considered. So there would not be a single case of structuring, one case fits all strategy. So there can be certain principles that, so just to give you an example, the final company, the final shareholders of the existing company, that can be a company, that can be an LLP, again a very strong structure because LLP doesn't have further repatriation restrictions. So an LLP, a limited liability partnership or a partnership firm can, although the tax rate is higher in case of an LLP or in case of a partnership firm, but there is no further dividend repatriation cost. So an LLP can very easily repatriate dividend. So in case the final shareholder is an LLP, I would actually think of structuring debt. So I would not think of structuring debt in case the interest is to be paid to a company, but in case the interest is to be paid to a company, in case the interest is actually to be paid to a LLP, debt can be considered. So these are just various things that can be considered for structuring. Is it a non-resident? Let's say in case it's a Singapore, in case it's a Swiss resident, again debt may be more interesting because Swiss companies are subject to much lower tax. But the fundamental principle, in case all this complication is not something that you want to look at, a simple structure can be an existing company having a wholly owned subsidiary, and the instrument can be a equity instrument. So that's a simple and a much favorable structure than what generally I've seen structuring happen, where instead of equity, debt is used. So I would suggest to use equity then debt. And in case repayment is important, in that case, preference shares can be considered. One of the obvious thing is whether would leasing be a good idea? So leasing can be an excellent idea for land and building, because in case of land and building, there are a lot of other taxes which are applicable. So we look at that later on. So GST to be considered, stamp duty to be considered. So in case of leasing, none of these tax is applicable. So that's one of the very important advantage. So that's a benefit. This is in case of land and building. In case of plant and machinery, I don't suggest going for a leasing model. In case of land and building, it can be considered. In case of the disadvantage in case of leasing is it leads to tax leakage. So similar to what we looked at debentures, loans, where interest payment is compulsory, becomes compulsory. You have no option but to make interest payment unless you structure it properly. So here also in lease, you have no option but to pay a lease rent to whosoever. It can be the existing company where the CWIP is not getting transferred, but the land and building is used for the new company. So again, as I mentioned, you pay tax at 25%, you save tax at 17%. So again, there's a tax leakage of 8%. So therefore, lease leads to tax leakage. Also, it becomes difficult to claim subsidy benefits because MSME, large enterprise, etc. There's a huge amount of subsidy benefits which has been announced, and it becomes important criteria that in case you are forming a new company, a new manufacturing company, why not claim subsidy benefits also? Subsidy benefits are linked to the capital involved, the capital investment, etc. So therefore, it becomes difficult to claim subsidy benefits. So in case this is an important criteria, and this should be considered for actually structuring a lease. So these are important disadvantages as well, where you can actually consider doing an outright sale of land and building. And so what happens in case of an outright sale? So land and building, the leasing aspect we have already covered, and what happens in case of transfer of land and building? So in case of transfer, stamp duty and registration fees is payable. In Gujarat, 4.9% is the stamp duty, 1% is the registration charge, 1% overall cost, including stamp duty and registration cost, in case there's a scheme which is done through the NCLT route. So it takes some time, it is a bit costly. So generally not a preferred option, but in case the quantum of land and building is high, this is certainly a approach that can be considered because that is substantial saving in the stamp duty and registration fees. GST is not applicable in case of transfer of land. That's pretty clear. In case of building also, it can be contended that GST is not applicable. It is applicable in certain cases. So this has to be seen on a case-to-case basis. But so this is litigative. It's possible that because GST again is a new provision, so can't comment much on that. But in most of the cases, GST will not be applicable in case of transfer of building as well. Lastly, in case of income tax, there are certain deeming provisions. Section 50C that talks about transfer has to be taken place at X price. That X price is Jantri value. Section 56(2)(10) where it says that the recipient should pay at least the Jantri value, unless otherwise that difference will be considered as income in the hands of the recipient. So these also are the provisions that should be considered. A very easy thing, if you don't want to consider any of these provisions, is simply to transfer land and building at the Jantri value. So GIDC lease, I have taken a bit more emphasis on the GIDC lease because there are certain, I would say, provisions that can be difficult to fulfill. So in case of GIDC, it's difficult to do a sub-licensing of GIDC lease. Also, in case of sub-licensing, in case it is allowed, there's an additional leasing fees which has to be paid to the GIDC. So in that case, that's a complete case of leakage. It's a money which is getting leaked. So that may become a difficult model to follow. So in that case, you can end up actually transferring the lease. In case of transfer fees is applicable, but in most cases, these transfer fees is exempted. So that case is where substantial beneficial ownership of both the entities remain the same, the transferor and the transferee. In that case, there is no transfer fee which is applicable. So in that case, it is something which can be considered that you can transfer and no transfer fee is to be payable. Also, in case of stamp duty, in most of the cases, stamp duty is not going to be payable because GIDC lease, the nature is such that you don't have to register it right away. You have to register it on fulfillment of some conditions like commencement of production, etc. So in this case also, high possibility that you would not have paid stamp duty in the hands of the transferor. So once the buyer buys the lease is transferred. After that, it can be registered and stamp duty can be payable. So there is no case of double stamp duty which is payable. GST implication will certainly have to be considered. There is a possibility that GST in this case will be payable. GST is exempt in case of a long-term government lease, but here because it takes place between two private parties, even though it is a GIDC lease, because of that, GST may be applicable, and also the recipient will not get a input tax credit on this. So this is a case of leakage, GST tax leakage. However, I mean, so this is a cost benefit analysis which has to be considered. Paying additional leasing fees to GIDC versus paying the GST cost. In case of other movable assets, that's a much easier way to handle it. Lease doesn't have to be considered because it's not a challenge to transfer the movable assets. There's a stamp duty of 2% which is applicable on transferring it via agreement. However, it is exempt in case it is structured properly. It is exempt, so you can have land and building transferred through one agreement, movable properties transferred through other agreement, and this can be exempt. The stamp duty as well as the registration charges. The reason is very simple. The rationale is simple. Stamp duty, the Registration Act requires XYZ assets to be registered. So that includes land, it includes building, it includes certain intangible assets. Apart from that, no assets are required to be registered. So generally, it is possible that movable assets are transferred to a separate agreement. That agreement is not registered. It is a commercial understanding between two parties, which will still hold in the court of law, and at the same time, no stamp duty or registration charges are payable. If done through court process, 1% tax will be applicable on this. The other question is that can the, I just have a very quick look at the questions in case we have got any.
Thank you. Participants, you may type in your questions in the chat box. Meanwhile, I'm also, I have allowed the participants to unmute themselves.
Okay.
If you want to ask a question.
Right. Yeah. So what I can do is, Premalji, I can still continue with the presentation and then have a look at the questions.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I would request if any questions you want to ask, please type in right away, and we'll again take a break after a while, and I can have a look at the questions again. Yeah. So the other question is that why keep a consideration? Why not transfer the assets at? Why not just give the assets? So the question is whether it is possible. Again, not a complete yes and no answer, but incidentally, Section 47, which exempts a few transactions from being taxable, it includes gift as a transaction. So incidentally, what happens is that in case a company gives certain assets to another company, this will be completely exempt from being regarded as a transfer, and so no capital gains is payable on that. So theoretically, it is possible. It is not impossible to do it. Also, as we discussed, anyways, a company transferring any assets to a wholly owned subsidiary is anyways exempt. So in both the cases, you don't actually have to have a consideration. It may be advantageous to have a consideration. That's a different topic. I'm going to cover that, but I'm just dealing with this case where we are gifting the assets. So the existing company transferring assets to the new company, whether, I mean, do you need to pay consideration for that or not? So what are the provisions in the income tax regulations? There are deeming provisions, domestic transfer pricing, under which the related party transactions have to be valued at a fair price. Apart from that, there are anyways 48 to be transactions where the expenditure has to be incurred at a fair price. So, however, this is not relevant in case of an exempt transaction. So again, it's relevant only in case of a transaction which is taxable. So if there is a complete gift, so complete gift, by that I'm not saying inadequate consideration, I'm saying no consideration at all. In that case, it is domestic transfer pricing would not be applicable. Apart from that, in case of land and building, there are few deeming fictions as we discussed, 50C and 56(2)(10), which talks about stamp duty value as the minimum price. So again, in case of a pure gift or in case of transfer of a wholly owned subsidiary, these provisions are not applicable. So again, it can be. The reason I'm mentioning this provision is that in case it's not a gift transaction, in case consideration is going to be, you still want to provide a consideration, then better provide it at the Jantri value or more than the Jantri value. Don't provide it at a lower than the Jantri value. Either the Jantri value or the fair market value, whichever is higher. Higher price is not a problem. Lower price will be a problem. Sorry, my bad. In case of land and building, you would not actually be able to have a higher price. So ideally, it should be transferred at a Jantri value. Not higher, not lower. because the purpose is to ensure that the subsidiary should have as much profits as possible. Right. Apart from that, GAR is to be considered, the General Anti-Avoidance Regulation. So it should not look like a artificial arrangement. There has to be a commercial rationale to justify the arrangement. Not been tested yet. GAR, there is no active case on GAR yet, but this is something which is there in the provision. So it has to be considered. In the other regulations, the implications of gift are under stamp duty. Anyways, the circle rates will be considered for stamp duty payable. For GST, they will ignore that it is exempt. They will consider the fair market value because it's a transaction between related parties. Also, there can be some corporate governance regulations which may be applicable under either Companies Act or SEBI, which has to be considered. But by and large, it is possible to have a transaction without any consideration. The point is that, I mean, in case, even if you end up having a consideration without, in case you have some consideration, so not a gift transaction, but it is transferred at a fair market value, that doesn't mean you have to transfer cash. So let's say the fair market value turns out to be 100 crores. You don't actually have to transfer 100 crores in the new company. Otherwise, you actually have to put 100 crores in that new company and then transfer that to the existing company. So it's a round trip of the funds flow, which is very difficult to achieve. So better you can just issue securities. You can issue equity shares, preference shares, debentures, all the securities, optionally convertible, partially convertible, etc. And that's certainly possible. I have just reiterated that point that you can transfer, have the transfer and have a cash consideration for that. The transaction is simpler in that case, but this is useful to structure a mirror shareholding. You can also issue securities. The new company can issue securities. Again, a case where, let's say, the assets are being transferred for 100 crores, securities are being issued. The benefit is that there is no fund flow which is there. It's simply a transfer of securities, issue of securities. The primary advantage of having a consideration against which you issue securities versus gift. So while gift looks very simple, one of the main advantage of having a case of consideration plus securities is that repatriation becomes easy. Because what happens if the new company ends up with a profit of 50 crores in the next 5 years? How do you actually repatriate that 50 crores to the existing company? Otherwise, that fund will be completely blocked. So using that 100 crores, the instruments that you issued of 100 crores, you can repay that instruments, either preference shares, equity shares, debt, etc. So that can be repaid and that can be used for transferring the funds to the existing company without any tax. So that can be a very strong advantage of having consideration and issuing securities against that. In case it's a loss, it is anyways going to be exempt. Even though there is capital gains, you are issuing it, you are transferring it at fair value, which is much higher than the cost. It is still going to be exempt in case of a loss. In case of parallel structure, also it is possible to be exempted. That we can take it up later in case anyone is interested with that structure. Right. Also under securities, also it is possible to structure it as a mirror shareholding. An interesting structure is where, let's say, assets worth 100 crores are transferred, against that debentures are issued or preference shares is issued. So, so the new company is a company where 100 crores of preference shares are issued or debentures, so loan, but there is no equity. So using, let's say, 1 crore of equity infused by the final promoters, the promoters can still become the owners of the new company. By using just 1 crore, they can be owners of that 100 crores. So what is happening is that the existing company is funding the new company by issuing, using debt. They are funding the new company, and the promoters still become the owner. So you have the benefit of having a smooth exit. Simply sell the equity shares, and all the consideration reaches the final shareholders. So you have a smooth exit. At the same time, it is possible to use the funds of the existing company to finance the capex of the new company. So we have reached almost the end of the presentation. This is a slide on the transfer pricing provision. So 15BAB, obviously the tax rate is lower, 17%. So this is a provision where you cannot artificially inflate the profit of the new company. So if the profit genuinely is supposed to be 50 crores, you cannot show 150 crores of profit. So this is a provision where it's a provision. It's a opposite to international transfer pricing, where in case you incur some expenditure with a related party. So this is focusing on the related party transaction. So in case certain expenditure are incurred with a related party, what is the fair market value or what is the arm's length price of that? So if there's a purchase of goods that, so the examples that we have given is transfer of CWIP, capital work in progress, from the existing company to the new company, should be transferred at fair market value or ALP, or else alternatively at zero price. The second option is regular sales, purchase, service transaction. Then it doesn't matter whether it's WOS or any other company. This should happen at fair market value or arm's length price, period. There is no other option. In case goods worth 100 rupees are sold for 150 by the new company, that's not possible. Goods worth 100 rupees can be sold for 80 rupees. That's still permissible. So the key is that the profit should not be artificially inflated. And the other case is interest on loan between such entities. So as we mentioned, in case there is a debt infusion in the new company, there has to be a fair market value for the interest which is charged on that loans. You cannot give, to put it very simple, you cannot give interest-free loans to such new companies which are involved, which are having 115 BAB benefits. FEMA, in case the new existing company is held by, it's a foreign-owned company, in that case, FDI, the foreign direct investment regulations will be applicable. So this is something which has to be considered, the sectoral benefits, etc. So I'm talking about a case where there's an existing company, there's a WOS, wholly owned subsidiary. So if that existing company has a wholly owned subsidiary, this will amount to FDI investment, foreign direct investment, even though it's an Indian company which is having this subsidiary, because the existing company is owned by a foreign company, and owned includes 50% ownership by the non-resident. So even that is considered as a foreign-owned company, and any downstream investment will be considered as a FDI investment. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot. I think I can have a look at the questions now.
Bukas. Okay.
Yeah. So do we want to do a mic on session where participants can directly ask the questions?
बताओ साहब No capex yet incurred. New project capex nine started to
The existing business yet.
So I'll just probably read out the questions. Yeah, so there's a question where it says that there's an existing LLP which comprises of 2 units. LP wants to convert the second unit to a company. Then how can the benefit of lower tax be availed? So certainly, what can happen is that the second unit can be transferred to a new company, and I'm assuming that the second unit has still not commenced production. So simply the LLP can transfer the second unit to a new company. And 1/5 BAB benefit can be claimed by the new company. The new company can directly be owned by the LLP or can be owned by the partners of the LLP. So both the options are possible. And if the new unit has not actually commenced production, it is something that certainly can be considered. The benefit is that the rate of LLP from 34% will reduce to 17%, the corporate tax rate. However, one thing which has to be considered is that LLP has a tax-free repatriation of profits, which is possible, which is not possible in case of a company, including this 17% company. So the repatriation will be in case the shareholders are Indian shareholders or Indian resident, the repatriation cost will be 36% dividend tax. Yeah, the right. The other question is that there is an existing company and it is into manufacturing of specialty chemical business. it has spare industry adjacent to the existing, and now the company has expansion plans to add a few more plants on the spare land. Can we form a new company with shareholders different than? So the company has expansion plans to add a few more plants. And can we form a new company with shareholders different from those in the existing company? Certainly, it is possible. And the new company takes the land on lease and purchases new plants and starting. So as we discussed, that's the reason I actually have considered lease in a bit detailed manner. So it is certainly possible to lease land. Whether you should lease building or not is a separate question. You can lease building as well, but building, if it is considered as plant, you have to be careful that has it already been put to use or not. But to put it simply, you can lease land, you can lease building. It's certainly possible. If you have new plant and machinery, you can take the benefit. The only thing is that the benefit, you will not benefit, you will not be able to claim the benefit of the new provision as much as you would be able to claim in case you actually transfer it. In case of an outright transfer, the benefit will be more. Here, the benefit will be less, but you can certainly do this. In fact, better to have the benefit because it's a lifetime benefit. And then in future, you can just keep infusing money and capex in the new company and keep expanding the base of the 17% income. Yeah, other question is that we have a specialty chemical manufacturing business in the GIDC area. We have spare land adjacent to the current facility. We are setting up a facility there as a part of the backward integration of current process, which will improve the quality of the products for specific international market. Is this new facility applicable for tax benefit? So we have considered this case. It's a case similar to the Supreme Court decision of textile machinery, where that was also a case of backward integration and allowed, the benefit was fairly allowed to that concern. Of course, the thing that has to be considered is that the dependency, the manufacturing dependency between the two units should be as low as possible. The new unit should not look like an artificial division. I mean, by that I'm referring to the common facilities. So if you are substantially relying on the common facilities for both the units, it may look like an artificial division. So that is something that should be avoided. Otherwise, a backward integration is certainly eligible for the benefit. I am assuming that there's going to be new capex. So considering that, it's something that can certainly be considered to claim 1,5BAB benefits. Yeah, so one follow-up question was that what if the second unit has started commercial production? In that case, it becomes difficult. So I'm not considered in this in the present. So that's the stage 3 condition. So that we are not covering in the present seminar. In case there's sufficient interest, we can do another seminar for that. But that will be a longish process. Difficult to claim benefit in case the commencement of production has already happened. So incorporation of new company for new projects, existing company will have to share common facilities, employees, and provide few services, of which GST will be levied. Our input is exempt from GST, and therefore GST will be cost. In case, is it beneficial to form new company? So one thing which is to be considered is that in case there's a dependence between the two companies with respect to even the common facility, then probably, as I mentioned, it may look like an artificial split and not a real split between the two entities. So in that case, it may be possible that the benefit of 115BAB is not allowed. So that is something that should be considered. We have an existing partnership firm. We have formed a new company with new machinery and capital, but the product is same. New company is giving goods on job work to the old company. Is the new company eligible? New company is giving goods on job work to the old company. Is the new company eligible? Certainly. So just so again, it's a case of backward integration. Again, as I mentioned, textile machinery covers this case. Since it's new machinery, new capital, there's a capital expansion. I'm assuming less reliance on the common facilities. So certainly, this is something that is can be considered for claiming BAB benefits. The only disadvantage is that we are facing is withdrawal of funds from the company. And also dividend is taxable. If we opt for that option, please advise on how to withdraw funds. So this is a very important question, and it can be a very long answer for this, but so there's no no easy way to actually repatriate dividend. As I mentioned, one simple way to do it is try to infuse more and more preferences instead of equity. You can use debentures, but again, debentures is a problem because in case of debentures, there's a compulsory interest payment which has to be done. So that's not something which is advisable. So one thing that can be considered is instead of debentures, instead of equity, you can probably use more preferences. Again, as I mentioned, you will have to look deeply into preferences, because preferences, again, the questions will be that do you have to do you charge dividend, do you charge repayment? Does there have to be a repayment payment? Because there has to be some consideration. You cannot have a zero coupon preference share. You can have it, but it's subject to XYZ condition. So just to put it very simply, the arm's length condition which is applicable for debentures is not applicable for preferences. So that is one advantage where you can get out of dividend provisions. But the reason I'm saying that dividend also has certain challenges is because of section 56(2)(7)(b). So under 56(2)(7)(b), you need to get a valuation for preferences. So in case you are able to manage that, preferences will be the best option. In fact, in most of my cases, I suggest using more preferences and very less amount of equity. Also, I'll just add one more point here. In case of equity and preferences, there's a huge amount of authorized capital cost which has to be paid on the stamp duty. So one easy solution for this is to have a premium attached to it. So there can be a security premium attached to it. So let's say 100 rupee equity, 100 rupees preferences. Doesn't have to be 100 rupees paid up. There can be 20 rupees of paid up capital, 80 rupees of securities premium, and that entire 80 rupees will be exempt from stamp duty. So that's one of the structuring consideration that can be considered. If it's a debenture, you anyways don't have to pay any stamp duty on the authorized capital. There is no authorized capital in case of debentures. Right. Premalji, do you want to do a mic off session, or should I continue with this format?
You can continue with the format. We can continue. However, participants can unmute themselves and ask the questions as well.
Right. Yeah. So one more question is that we have incorporated a private limited company in 2018. We are having existing proprietorship firm which was eventually closed, and the business was fully operational in the private limited company. We also undertook capital expansion of the existing facilities in the year 2019. Is it possible to form new company with same directors but different shareholding pattern and purchase the assets from the existing private company at the current market value and avail? So one question is that has production already started in the existing company? I'm assuming that the production has still not commenced. So in case the production has not commenced, it's certainly possible to buy the assets from the existing company.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, the production has started in 2019. Like,
okay, and all the assets are okay. So you have started to claim depreciation on all the assets?
Yeah, no, 1920 return we had claimed even the additional depreciation.
Okay, so in that case, what happens is that you will fail the plant and machinery test of having at least, not more than 20% whole plant and machinery.
Okay.
So this will be considered as a plant and machinery which is already put to use. So in this case, if you actually have substantial amount of expansion, where the old plant and machinery reduces, it is lower than 20%. In that case, you can do it, or else an alternative is to just have a new company with very less. Let's say you have a very capital intensive process where there are process A, process B, process C. So you can think of having at least one process, not the entire process, but at least one process in the new company. Start using less amount of capex, so that mainly it's the new capex which is there. So at least you are able to claim the benefit, even though the amount will be lower. So in future, any expansion that can happen in the new company.
Okay,
so this is just one way where you are reserving your right to claim BAB benefits.
Okay, fine. Directors can be the same.
Yeah, absolutely. They certainly can be the same. Even employees can be the same.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so one question is that how preference shares will help. So I'll just explain what preference shares are. So equity shares are shares where you get the ownership rights and you get the discrete the residual dividend rights. In case of preference shares, you don't have ownership right. There are no voting power with respect to preference shares. You still get dividend, but that is a fixed, generally a fixed amount of dividend, which is applicable in case of preference shares. The reason it helps is in case, as we discussed, a case where 100 crores worth CWIP is to be transferred, for that you issue preference shares and not equity shares. So preference shares is something that is compulsorily redeemable. You cannot have unlimited period of preference shares. So within 5 years, within 10 years, you can simply redeem those preference shares. So up to 100 crores or up to whatever amount you have made infusion in preference shares, you can actually take that capital back. So preference shares, the benefit of preference shares is it helps to get your invested capital back. Profits is not something that can come back through preference shares, but a substantial amount, because again, it's a manufacturing concern, the amount will anyways be substantial. So at least your capital can be taken back without additional cost.
Any more questions, participants? You can unmute yourself and ask a question, or you can type in your query.
Okay, I think no new questions are coming up. So thanks. I'm very happy that so many questions have come up. So thanks a lot for asking these questions. Yeah, I think there's one more question. If from an existing company we are gifting assets to the new company, then can we claim the benefit? We can certainly claim the benefit. As I mentioned, it cannot be depreciated assets. If a CWIP is getting transferred, if it's depreciated asset, I have not covered that in this seminar. But anyways, that's going to be difficult. In case of CWIP, you can gift it, claim the benefit. Incidentally, if you gift it, your cost of acquisition is going to remain the same as the existing company. You still get a markup of cost of acquisition. You can still claim depreciation on that. So it's something that can certainly be considered.
Okay, so that brings to the a close to this session. And if there are any further questions, I'm sure our members can reach out to us or Mr. Mehta, and we would be happy to help you to answer your questions. I would like to propose a vote of thanks, and post the vote of thanks, we will have the national anthem, and then the session will end. So, our guest speaker for today, Mr. Suril Mehta, Associate Director of KC Mehta and Company. On behalf of the President, Mr. Manohar Chawla, the Vice President, Mr. Paresh Saraiya, the Vice President, Senior Vice President, Mr. Paresh Saraiya, and Vice President is Abhishek Gangwal. And on behalf of Mr. Bharat Shah, who's the Treasurer, I would, thank all of the participants and Mr. Mehta to conduct this beautiful session. We had excellently covered the presentation on the 15% tax regime and what could be the implication and the strategies and the way forward. I'm sure based on the knowledge that we have gained today and the expertise shared by the esteemed speakers on the subject, which has guided all the participants, and it will help the participants immensely. I would like to thank all the participants once again to join this session today. We would come up with various other programs, pretty soon. Just to update, we have another program lined up. That is a session with Mr. Behram Vakil that is scheduled on the 22nd of January. This would be yet again an interactive session, and I'm sure many of the participants would want to hear from him. We also have a session which is on profit leadership that is on the 29th of this month, and that is again going to be a very interesting session. Most of our members do talk about the uh, increasing the profits, and how leadership can gain, and how the profits can be increased. So it's an interesting session. I'm sure all the participants would be benefited through this session. So we on the Secretariat's behalf as well, I would thank each and everyone present on this particular call, and also the participants who have registered but who couldn't make it. A couple of them were not able to make it due to various reasons. Thank you very much for participating. We shall now rise for the national anthem. May I request everyone to rise for the national anthem, please.
पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगल नायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks Premalji for